Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this June 24, 2014 edition of Nightcast. In the news from the Middle East, Baghdad will fall in less than 1 month, according to Sunni insurgents in Iraq. Speaking exclusively to BBC News, 2 anonymous fighters said they were determined to reach the capital very soon. Meanwhile, as you'll see in this opening video, friends, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has called for unity during a visit to the city of Irbil. Fergal Keane reports from Irbil.
The Kurds have battled to consolidate their territory, to keep their autonomous region free of ISIS. Yet in the shadow of its ancient citadel, the Kurdish capital Irbil is a sanctuary for Sunni fighters who don't belong to ISIS. And it was here that we met with some who travelled to and from the front line. These are tribal fighters from embattled Anbar province and claim Baghdad will soon fall.
It is a matter of time, less than 1 month. Now they're asking young Shia to fight against us. But we will be there very soon and Baghdad will fall under the revolution.
But that's far from certain, even for battle-hardened fighters driven by hatred of the Maliki government. What's also significant, though, is the resentment they feel towards their ISIS allies and their foreign fighters for hijacking the revolution.
I want to say to America and the world that this is not an ISIS revolution. This is a Sunni revolution. We ask the EU and America to support the Sunni people. We are not terrorists.
Their political spokesman said his men might even end up fighting ISIS once victory had been achieved.
The Sunnis reject ISIS. There's a vendetta between the tribes and ISIS because of crimes they have committed before. The battle with them is simply postponed.
The Iraqi army is still striking at insurgents but is demoralized and weak. Latest reports suggest the country's biggest oil refinery has fallen to the militants. Now America is pressing for a new Iraqi government more acceptable to Sunnis.
Without an adequate, transformative decision by the leaders of Iraq, anything that the United States or others or allies or friends would choose to do to try to fight back is going to be limited, if not impossible.
John Kerry was speaking here in Irbil, where Iraq's ethnic groups coexist peacefully under the Kurdish majority. It is a dream, but only that, of what a peaceful Iraq might look like.
Iraq is a complex catastrophe, and the idea that there will be one outright winner who can control the whole country is a fallacy. What we've heard from the Sunni fighters suggests a growing resentment of their ISIS allies. So even if the insurgency does win, it could merely be the first phase in a much longer war. Fergal Keane, BBC News, Irbil, Northern Iraq.
Well, friends, the complex is absolutely right. And, you know, the only way people are going to understand it, even in the future, the people who are there in that country and part of any one of the 3 major religious divisions that have become established there. You know, when you go on something you call the Bible other than God's Word, other than the Holy Bible, which teaches things very different than the Holy Bible teaches, one of the main things that relates to all this and that has been perverted and that causes a lot of the confusion is just which son of Abraham did Abraham take up to a mountain to sacrifice, and then God stop it by providing a ram from a bush, and then telling Abraham that he's going to bless Abraham through the seed of that son that was spared. The Bible says that son was Isaac. But the Quran, which is the religious book that many of the people in Iraq use, says it was Ishmael, the son of the Egyptian handmaid. But I'll bring that up again perhaps in a moment. Let's go to the next video from this perplexing complex, as this reporter put it. Let's go to Jonathan Beale reporting from Baghdad next here.
The government formation challenge is the central challenge that we face. In recent days, the security cooperation between the forces here in the Kurdish area have been really critical to helping to draw a line with respect to ISIL and also to provide some support to the Iraqi security forces.
Okay, friends, I was going to say I got ahead of myself, but I actually got behind myself. That first report that we opened with was anchored by Jonathan Beale reporting from Baghdad. Then this video that we just played, we go to a different area where Secretary of State John Kerry had told the Kurdish leaders in northern Iraq that forming an inclusive Iraqi government is of vital importance to defeating jihadist militants. Those are U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's words. He said that forming an inclusive Iraqi government is of vital importance to defeating jihadist militants threatening to take over the country. This meeting, in this clip of video, with the president of Iraqi Kurdistan, Mohammed Barzani, in the city of Irbil, Mr. Kerry also praised the role that Kurdish forces have played in trying to contain the militants. Friends, I was just saying how you've got a situation where those people have been divided over religion, and yet most of them believe that the land over there should belong to them. All of the land, including the land where Judah is in what we call Israel, the little nation state of Israel now that includes Jerusalem and Samaria and Tel Aviv and other areas of Israel. So what's the real bottom line of what's happening? How is it that the United States is able to be so involved with Iraq and so involved, as we saw in the news the last couple of days, with Egypt? We'll come back to Egypt in just a moment. I've got some stories from today related to Egypt. And we're going to go back to the story 2 days ago. I don't want to let that just slip by, where the United States released over $500 million to the Egyptian army, and then the next day the courts of Egypt announced that the journalists they were holding over there have been given jail terms of from 7 to 10 years, which is extremely ironic that the United States would say, wait a minute, we're not going to give you as a lover. The Bible speaks of hiring lovers, your allies. You pay them, you hire them like you're hiring a whore, only you do it in reverse. The whore pays the lover instead of the lover paying the whore. God puts it in those terms because his people, to whom God was married, have rejected their God and have gone into whoredom with other lovers other than their husband God. They've jumped into bed with other lovers, and they are able to jump in bed with their other lovers because they hire their lovers. They, the whore. And I'm talking about the modern-day nations of Israel, including the sons of Joseph. And yes, Ephraim, you're in on this too. You hire your lovers too. It's not just the United States, but the United States has become the big boy in that because the United States has all these Yankee dollars. It's still able to spend in a madhouse crazy way. Why? Because God has blessed the United States as the breadbasket so richly in the past decades. And because the United States dollar, the Yankee dollar, as we call it, as it's nicknamed, and there's songs about the Yankee dollar, and rum and Coke, or Coke and Yankee dollar. But friends, it's still the world reserve currency for a little while longer, maybe only hours longer. And when that makes the Yankee dollar have magic to it. But as soon as the United States dollar drops out as the world currency, which it will, because God is going to he's going to allow that to happen, and things are already underway, as we can see in news, for that to happen. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever the case is on it, the United States, especially the state of Illinois out of the United States, have really been helpful toward helping create a new money as of a little more than a decade ago, just at the turn of the century, 1999, 2000. The first couple of years it was just done in an accounting fashion, and then they actually coined the money and printed paper for the money, the euro. The United States actually helped the euro get off the ground, and the United States gave its blessing to the euro, and still does in many ways, without realizing that money is a threat to the position, is one of several threats now, to the position of the United States dollar as the world reserve currency. And another factor that may play into the downfall of the dollar is at some point, the United States dollar, the Yankee dollar, is also the petro currency. That's two different things. The world reserve currency and the petro currency are both the United States Yankee dollar. That puts the dollar, that enables the United States, even as tremendously in debt as we are, to just play with money as if there's no end to it, and have the Federal Reserve Bank just print plenty more, and we'll borrow some more, raise our debt ceiling, and we'll just keep borrowing some more, and then we'll give it away, $500 million or more over to Egypt. We'll give some to Iraq, but you got to change your leader. See, we're going to get involved in your politics. And you got to have a more this can't be. He's saying this can't be done with military, and so we're only going to give you a limited amount of military support. But even for that, you got to change your government. And Egypt, when the United States, Mr. Kerry spoke the other day and said the United States is all in favor of this new Sisi government, and as if it were part of the revolution that occurred since 2011. Do you realize that the revolution that occurred in 2011 that put in the man that the military took out? It's not the revolution. It's not representative of the 2011 revolution. It's a second revolution. And so when will it stop? I read you the verse yesterday from Isaiah 19, verse 2, where God speaks of, I will set Egyptian against Egyptian. Let me not misquote it. Let me just turn there real quickly. I think we can get our finger right before Jeremiah, Isaiah 19, verse 2. I think we can get our finger on it pretty quick. Verse 1, let's begin with verse 1. The burden of Egypt I put the slide up last night. I don't have it ready here for us tonight, but I'll just read this to you, friends. You can read it in your own Bible, too. Behold, the Lord rides upon a swift cloud, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And, verse 2, and this is God speaking through Isaiah 19, verse 2. And I, the great God, will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. So the United States thinks that it can, by giving $500,000 to the Egyptian military, buying its lover, it thinks it can control Egypt. When God says, I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, this is a prophecy for our day today. Friends, this has not been fulfilled in the past in the way it says, and they shall fight everyone against his brother and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. We haven't seen the end of Egypt and what's going to happen over there yet. Verse 3, and the spirit of Egypt shall fall in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols, and to the charmers, and to them that have familiar spirits, and to the wizards. And the Egyptians will I give over the land of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, says the Lord of hosts. We had an ally in the leader who was there in 2011, and the United States just allowed, danced with the new revolutionary leader, which the military that's in office now with Sisi just a few months ago put out of office. And so you listen to the talk. I'm going to play it again in a moment. Mr. Secretary of State Kerry's talk regarding Egypt a couple days ago when he announced that the United States was releasing that money we had been giving but held up for a while to the Egyptian military. And it makes you ask the question, many people didn't know, I bet a lot of you didn't know the United States was giving all that money to the Egyptian military. We've been buying our lovers around the world for a long, long time. And this weekend, on the channel that we talk about, that we do a service on the weekend. I'm gonna play some sermons by Mr. Herbert Armstrong related to hiring our lovers, and we're gonna go over some of the details on this thing and that. Now, I got a few more news stories for tonight, and I'm gonna play that video to you from Egypt. I have one more. Let's see, friends. Let me put a chart up on the screen for just a moment that relates to the seals, the 6 seals of Revelation, while I figure out which one of these we're missing a video in one of these. I think maybe we have this one. These 6 seals relate to how we select our news stories for this program. If a story relates to religion, the religious deception, and relates to the biggest organization that causes religious deception around the world, that's, as Jesus Christ described in plain language, what is the first seal of Revelation 6, which is depicted there as a white horse. And then if it relates to war and rumors of war, that's what Jesus Christ described in plain language in Matthew 24, Luke 13, Mark 13, Luke 21, and Matthew 24, as the activity of the second seal of Revelation, which is depicted as a red horse. And of course, this horse also carries not just war and rumors of war, but world war, because he mentions the factor of nation against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And we had our first instance of world war last century, 20th century, beginning in 1914 to 1919, with round 1 of World War, often referred to as World War I. And then we had a recess, and then we had round 2 from 1939 to 1945, and that was round two, is often most referred to as World War II. And just before World War II, in 1936, Mussolini, when he invaded Ethiopia, he announced that he had revived the Holy Roman Empire, and God's end-time apostle and servant, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, was able to see. God opened his mind to see this, to be able to give to the rest of us the fact that Mussolini's invasion into Ethiopia and his announcing that Mussolini had revived the Holy Roman Empire, that God opened Mr. Armstrong's mind to see that that was the present day timing of a verse in Revelation chapter 17 and verse 10, where it says, and there are 7 kings, related to the Gentile kings going back to the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, who were represented world-ruling empires. And the dream that God gave to King Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel interpreted for the king explained that you, King Nebuchadnezzar, are this head of gold on this great statue that was in your image. You are the greatest world empire ever, the head of gold. After you, there will be another world empire, but it won't be as the quality that the world empire you've been over will be. Just like silver is not as valuable as gold, it'll be represented by silver. And let me just throw this slide up on the screen for a moment, friends. We've got a slide that shows you the in the far left column. It shows you Daniel's interpretation of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. The very, very top, you can see there's a head of gold in it, and then the next kingdom would be a kingdom of silver, represented by silver, the arms and the breast, the chest. It wouldn't be as fine a quality, but it'd be a world-ruling kingdom, and we're able to know who that is, and then the bronze, and then the 2 legs of iron, which they come all the way down into our time today. To the bottom part of this chart in the left column, the 2 legs extend all the way down to our day today, so that we've got a situation as described in Revelation 17:10 that says, and 7 kings, 5 are fallen. The 5 that are represented above the red line, they've come and they've gone. Now I'll talk about these in more detail another time because I'm running out of time for tonight's broadcast. But when we get down to the bottom 2, I've explained this before in this broadcast, how the 6th head, we're able to know that because it happened during the time of Mr. Armstrong's life in 1936, that, let me just zoom down to the bottom, that 6th head was Mussolini for a short time, until 1945, when he died April 28, 1945. That was the 6th revival. That was the 6th head of this Holy Roman Empire. Holy because the Pope is involved with it, and or so-called holy, because when you understand who the Pope is, you know it's not a true holiness, but it's part of prophecy and part of this world today. But the 7th head is yet to come, and Mr. Armstrong even though Mr. Armstrong died in 1986, his broadcast, his words, his publications are still available on the internet, and it's as if he were still speaking from the grave when you go back to his material. And he told us there's one yet to come, and it'll be the 7th and final head, and that's what we're watching for. Friends, let me switch charts, go back to this. When we are looking at the seals, we've seen 4 of them happen. I would describe the first 2. We've got the famine, the black, depicted by a black horse. We've got the 3 elements of the 4th seal, depicted by a pale horse, that are yet to happen, and they are happening, and they're happening in greater and greater intensity. The elements of that 4th seal are loimos, disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. We're going to see many more of those before we go into the next seal, the 5th seal. We're also going to see seismic activity. Last night there was a 7.9 earthquake, and we're going to see more earthquakes, friends, and greater intensity, and trouble, where Jesus Christ said there would be troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, mob seditions, and then would follow the mega trouble, the great tribulation, the fifth seal, a time of the revival of this seventh head that we were just mentioning. It'll be a time when that seventh head creates World War III. It revives World War to round 3. It'll be the time of a great martyrdom of God's saints. And it'll be the time of the greatest trouble mankind has ever known. Jesus Christ said there's no time since the beginning of the earth to the time of this trouble that has ever been so bad, and it'll never be as bad again as what's coming during the Great Tribulation that we're watching for. And Jesus Christ told us in Luke 21, verse 36, to be watching and praying about world events. Why watch and pray? Because when you watch and pray about the world events, you become an active part of the news. You can tell God, hey, God, what you'd like to see happen. And if you're praying according to His Word, God may well respond to what you're saying. And He may, part of which may be, thy kingdom come. He may speed things up instead of letting them lag as He has, friends, in many ways, because of you and me. Why the delay? Some people are like, why the delay? It was the big delay. This should have happened decades ago. Well, yeah, maybe so. But those who are saying that are probably part of the problem. Includes both of us. All right, friends, quickly, I want to get to a couple more stories. And I think, there are some things happening that Iraq's not the only thing going on around the world. The Boko Haram guys, they're out kidnapping more people, and that problem's going. But let me skip ahead because I got a little long-winded. We're getting a little short on time. Let me just let you hear these words. Let me see. I'm not sure which one we're on. I lost my place. Let me let you hear these words from U.S. Secretary of State while I figure out exactly where we are. We're going to go over just a few minutes tonight, friends, just a little bit. Here's U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry.
After 3 difficult years of transition, the United States remains deeply committed to seeing Egypt succeed.
All right, friends, now that is the video that I was wanting to show you. This is from 2 days ago, news 2 days ago. This is now Tuesday. This would have been from Sunday when he's speaking about how the United States is going to give the money to Egypt. I wanted you to be able to see this. Let's pick it up from where we are.
We want to see the people of Egypt succeed, and we want to contribute to the success of Egypt. As President Obama told President al-Sisi after his inauguration, we are committed to working together to fulfill the full promise of Egypt's 2011 revolution and to support the political and economic and social aspirations of the Egyptian people, as well as their universal human rights.
Now, friends, I'm going to stop there for just a moment again. There's just a little bit more he says, and we're going to play a little bit more of that. But I want you to know, because we're about to go over our usual half-hour time, I want you to stick with me for just a few more minutes, because after this video, I'm going to play you a video from today showing, this will be our next video after this, showing you how journalists have gathered in London and around the world to protest against what happened the day after U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry announced that they were releasing all this money to the Egyptian military. And the very next day, the courts of Egypt announced a 7-year jail sentence and longer for the journalist over there. Well, the United States, I was about to say earlier, the United States is known for a constitution that protects the freedom of not only religion, but the freedom of the press. That's extremely important freedom. You would think that what our government foundationally represents would say, wait a minute, dear lover Egypt, you think we're going to give you this money when you violate a principle as important as the freedom of the press, which is representative of our country, who's giving you this money, all this money? I say, wait a minute. There are strings attached to this money. Or, you would think the United States would use the power of this hiring its lover, giving him this money, say, wait a minute. Unless you, Mr. President, are willing to pardon what your courts have done against these journalists and uphold the freedom of the press, we're not giving you this money. I mean, United States, you are making yourself an enemy with your lovers, the rest of your lovers around the world, with your foolishness. And a lot of the world, some go along with and some do not go along with the perversion being passed by our judges of this country, and well welcomed by the current administration of allowing marriages that are contrary to the way God says in the Bible that a marriage should be between a man and a woman. And he calls any kind of sexual relationship between a man and a man or a woman and a woman a great perversion. That's according to the God of your Bible. I don't care what the Presbyterian churches say in contradiction to God's Word. You're just flying in the face of God's Word, and you're going to find out that the great God rules from the heaven, and that because of things like that, this country is going to have all of its cities laid waste. That's what God says through the prophets of old. Your cities will be laid waste for your iniquities, and that's one of your iniquities. Perverted marriage, adultery, perverted sex, and adultery, giving up the great God and hiring your own lovers, and in giving up the great God, giving up the day on which he tells us from the tree of life is the day on which we should worship him and remember to keep holy. Yeah, God does tell us to keep that day sanctified, keep it holy. Don't work on that day. Some try to pervert that and say, oh, well, we keep the commandments every day. Well, I'm sorry, but that fourth commandment, friend, is not an everyday commandment to do the same thing. It's a two-part commandment. The first part of it says the first six days of that commandment, we are to work and be a good provider. The seventh day part of that fourth command is a two-part command. The seventh day, only the seventh day, are we to not work or do any servile work. We're to stop and sanctify that day, set it apart as special, and remember our Creator all the way back to the time when he rested on that day after recreating the earth that the devil and his angels had made a mess of after they tried to attack God's throne and take over God's throne and got thrown back down here where they had been. So some of you religious pastors who try to teach people that the earth was created 6,000 years ago, you're not reading the whole Bible. Because in Job, I believe it's chapter 38, maybe around verse 4, it talks about, you can find it in concordance if I didn't quote that right, you'll find that the sons of God, the angels, shouted for joy at the beauty of the creation of the earth when God created it. He created it gloriously beautiful. He didn't create it in the condition we find it in Genesis 1 verses 1 and 2. In Genesis 1, we're talking about a time thousands, maybe millions, maybe even billions of years after God originally created the earth, beautiful, such that the angels shouted for joy. We're looking at a time after Satan and his demons had gone up to God's throne and attempted to take over God's throne and got thrown back down here to this earth. And in the process, hitting the moon and leaving craters, big blast holes of craters, and leaving this world a gaseous mess with the waters outside their boundaries having flooded the entire earth. So we had a worldwide flood prior to the flood God did during the days of Noah and his sons. Let me stop, friends, because I don't want to go over too long tonight. I want us to, we want to finish this video with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry speaking to the Egyptians, telling them about all this money he's giving them. I'll give you the exact figure in a moment. But then we want to go, I was just telling you what you're going to see in the next video, where journalists have gathered in London and around the world to protest against the 7-year jail terms given to 3 al-Jazeera journalists in Egypt. Just to recap that for you, a court in Cairo found Australia's Peter Gresti and Mohammed Fahmy and Bahar Mohammed guilty of spreading false news, so the court says. And then I'll have the video with the BBC News director James Harding, who led staff and colleagues from other news organizations in a 1-minute silent protest outside New Broadcasting House in London. All right, I'm ahead of myself in giving you that introduction to the video. I'm going to show you after we play the rest of this. But in this video, John Kerry is speaking about the giving away of all that money that he gave, that the United States is giving to the Egyptians. I don't have the figure in front of me. I thought I might have it in my notes, but it was over $500 million. Here's the rest of that video.
I reiterated that message in each of my meetings today as part of a broad and a very constructive discussion of the issues, including Israeli-Palestinian relations, Egypt's return to the African Union, and confronting the shared threats of terrorism and extremism. I want to thank President al-Sisi for a very candid and comprehensive discussion in which we both expressed our deep concerns about a number of issues, but most importantly, our mutual determination for our countries to work together in partnership in order to deal with the challenges that we face. I emphasized also our strong support for upholding the universal rights and freedoms of all Egyptians, including freedom of expression, peaceful assembly, and association. We also discussed the essential role of a vibrant civil society, a free press, and rule of law, and due process in a democracy.
Okay, you heard at the very end of that, it's almost posthumous, it's almost humorous, where U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said that he mentioned freedom of the press with the President Sisi of Egypt. This is the day before the court sentences the journalist to 7 years jail sentences. So, excuse me, but if I can address the U.S. Secretary of State directly for a moment, Mr. Kerry, you mentioned all these wonderful things you had a talk with President Sisi of Egypt for, and at the same time as you're telling them, hey, the United States now is releasing the hold on all this money, over $500 million that we're giving you to the Egyptian military. Your words, you might as well have spoken to a brick wall. Your words just went nowhere. And your talk with him about freedom of the press? Excuse me. But the President Sisi has stated after his talk with U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, President Sisi has said he is not, he called the court and said that he is not going to use his power of pardon against he's going to leave their powers separate from his. He's not going to pardon these journalists. So, Mr. Kerry, your words about freedom of the press with President Sisi of Egypt bounced off deaf ears. Sad to say. because that creates a situation, as you'll hear in this video report with Emily Buchanan, on the journalist over there in London, in front of the new broadcasting house in London, and of course elsewhere around the world too, protesting in a 1-minute silent protest the sentences against the journalist, which causes journalists to fear to be able to report from both sides. Here, let's go on to her video. Emily Buchanan.
Expressing outrage in silence. Outside New Broadcasting House, journalists from the BBC and other news organisations united in protest.
There's a bigger issue of principle here, and that's the reason why the BBC, which obviously has a stake in freedom of expression and the freedom of journalists to do their job, must stand up when something like this happens. Because what is happening here is people are being intimidated and prevented from reporting. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Many of the journalists here identify closely with the jailed men. Some know them personally. Others feel they could easily be in the same predicament, imprisoned just for trying to cover both sides of Egypt's bitter political battleground. The al-Jazeera team comprised Mohammed Fahmy on the left, Baha Mohammed and Peter Grester, whose family is still reeling from the verdict.
I know Peter is being very, very strong, and this will be a hard time for him, but I know that he'll get through it.
This man, our son Peter, is an award-winning journalist. He's not a criminal. He's not a criminal.
But even after the international outcry, the Egyptian president is refusing to intervene.
I called the Justice Minister and told him in one sentence that I would not interfere in the judicial matters, because the Egyptian judiciary is independent and solid.
So hopes for a presidential pardon dashed. The journalists now face at least 7 years in prison, while their legal teams scramble to launch an appeal. Emily Buchanan, BBC News.
Okay, friends, that's the video that I wanted to show you regarding the 1-minute silent protest that was organized with journalists. Now, I found my notes on just how much the United States revealed it has released in military aid to Egypt that had been frozen since the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi last year. The amount in American dollars, Yankee dollars, was $575 million. That'd be 338 million pounds in military aid to Egypt. And that from the United States, attempting to buy its lover. And the United States, that is supposed to represent freedom of the press. Friends, that's it for our report tonight, this Tuesday night. God willing, and the creek don't rise, we will be back again tomorrow night, Wednesday night, with another edition of the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. This was my 400th time to host this program since the death of Robert Collins, the initial host, friends. Just thought I'd mention that for the record. Again, God, thanks for joining me tonight. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath, saying good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreath. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.